My little pony, my little pony. My little pony. Do you know you are my very best friends?
Hello, my little comic book ponies! I'm Critical Analysis, and I just finished reading My Little Pony numbers 43, 44, and 45, Ponies of Dark Water, a reference to the good but seemingly forgotten Pirates of Dark Water. And while this arc does not contain any adventures on the high seas, it does contain a lot to talk about, since this arc exemplifies the My Little Pony comics as a whole, both the good and the bad. I'd like to start out by shouting out to Hasbro, the owners of My Little Pony, with a hearty f*** you. On 3 different occasions, Hasbro placed manual content ID matches on a few of my admittedly negative reviews of the show's episodes from Season 6, and they attempted to claim monetization from those videos. My review of Episode 6, No Second Prances, was claimed on June 28th, an older video that reviewed the season opener was claimed almost a month later on July 27th, and the final one was placed the very next day on a second copy of my Episode 6 review, but with the visual content removed that I was using as bait. While Hasbro released the claim on the last one because it didn't contain visual content, the other videos only had their monetization restored after Hasbro failed to respond to my appeal. If you attempt to dispute a claim and it fails, you can appeal the claim with the risk that the claimant can respond by denying your appeal and placing a copyright strike on your account, placing your account in bad standings. Hasbro had 30 days to respond and they did nothing. Victory for me, I guess, as hollow as it was. All I did was wait. I still feel that their claims were spurious, that they were made solely because they didn't like my harsh criticism, and they responded with petty bullying. I informed YouTube about it, but they refused to step in and deal with corporations exploiting their system to violate freedom of speech and violate fair use doctrine, in which I had expressed several times that my videos were covered by in my appeal and in my dispute. But Hasbro refused to listen, and they refused to respond. It's for this reason that my personal boycott of Hasbro will continue, because if they didn't care about me, why should I care about them? But to put it quite simply, hashtag WTFU, where's the fair use? And with all of that said, let's get to the comic proper by looking at the covers. The covers overall aren't very good. As I've said in the past, a cover needs to do 2 things. It needs to stand out on a store shelf, or in the case of sites like Comixology, on the new releases page. And the cover needs to tell a story and get the reader interested in picking up the comic. Issue number 43's cover is decent enough if you notice the reflection in the water, but 44 and 45's are interchangeable and do nothing. 44 is a generic group shot on top of what looks like Pride Rock, with none of the characters even costumed as they are in the comics. The same applies to 45, which is almost the exact same thing, except that it's a group shot in a broken mirror. They only convey the main 6 are evil. If this is your first comic, then this will cause problems that I'll discuss later. Most of the variant covers don't work either. Some of them look cool, but that's all they do. They look cool. They are there to be collectibles and don't meet either of my previous requirements. And that's the first problem that the comics have, the variant covers. Except for the Van Gogh stylizing of Sarah Richard, most of the time, most of the variant covers are meant to be cool. They aren't meant to convey a story, they are meant to draw people to certain places so they can buy something that looks special on the outside but contains the same story on the inside. I'm not a big fan of this practice with variant covers because the value now comes from how special the cover looks and not in the comic itself. To put it simply, I don't like them. Our story opens with a full-page spread of the main 6 talking about how they just saved Equestria again, this time in the land of Abyssinia. Wow, first page of the comic and I've already run into a trope that MLP has used a few times. Off-screen adventures! I bet the writers think they're cute when they tease the audience with tales of another adventure that we did not get to see. It's one of those reasons why I didn't like My Little Pony Friends Forever number 26. It's not cute, it's annoying. Let us see that adventure if it was so damn important that it was worth mentioning. Anyway, as they continue walking, a noise creates a hot spring that wasn't there before. Chalking up the appearance of the hot springs to geothermal pressure, the main 6 decide to reward themselves with a nice hot soak. The next morning, Spike wakes up to an empty castle and to find that Ponyville is a mess. That's when Applejack shows up, now wearing a tie that almost mimics the one worn by Filthy Rich, but acting worse than him when she says that there's no room for family in business. What's gotten into her? I don't know, she's been acting weird all morning.
She got up and started building a wall around the trees before I even woke up.
Ah, she must be trying to keep out all those Mexican ponies who want to steal her apples. That's when a mighty image of Twilight Sparkle appears in the sky, declaring herself the Empress of Ponyville due to her superior intellect. This is one of the strengths of the My Little Pony comics, especially over the TV series, the imagery. The show is pretty tame in terms of imagery. In my recollection of the entire series, the most dark and twisted that the show ever got was King Sombra. The movies had a few of these moments as well, but they mostly manifested in the form of the final bosses. Here though, this is only page 9 of the first comic of the arc, and we see the sky darken with the imposing image of our Princess of Friendship. Twilight has done some dumb things, but she's never gone full tyrant. Only in the comics can you see that happen. Anyway, after Twilight's announcement, Rarity appears, claiming that she should rule Ponyville because she's more fashion forward. Spike and Apple Bloom run off to meet with the other Kingdom Mark Crusaders at the CMC Clubhouse. In their discussion, they figured out that the hot springs are the cause and send word to Celestia.
Meanwhile, thousands of miles away.
Celestia receives the letter and asks Luna to go to Ponyville. Me? Sister, is that wise? My history is one with its own darkness.
Precisely. Whatever happened here, you have personal experience. Tragic thought it may be, with such forces I can think of no one else better for the task.
Luna accepts the job and flies off.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch,
Applejack is bucking the hell out of the CMC's tree and chases them off the farm. That's when Luna appears and snares Applejack in her magic and tries to explain to her that she's under the control of dark magic. But Applejack breaks free and runs away. Spike and the CMC explain the situation to Luna. They come with a plan to split up. Luna and Spike staying in Ponyville to mitigate damage, while the CMC gets Sakura. However, as they enter the forest, they are stopped by Fluttershy.
We appear to have intruders.
And so our first comic ends on something completely different. Pinkie Pie looking like the Joker. While the pacing at the end of this comic feels a bit meh, it's a great way to begin the series. But with that said, here's where we run into the next problem with the series in general. On the same day issue 44 came out, Sonic the Hedgehog number 284 came out. Why is this relevant? Because when I started reading Sonic, I instantly remembered all that was going on. The fact that Sonic's premature party for saving the world would be interrupted by a well-coordinated attack on the Freedom Fighters' key locations by Dr. Eggman's various armies. But when I returned to My Little Pony, I was completely lost. Now, part of this could be because I dedicate more memory to Sonic than I do My Little Pony. But let's assume that this is not the case. This is the result of two problems. The first is because the last comic didn't really leave an impact. It didn't really drive me to keep reading, but that's because a lot of MLP's arcs are really predictable. By the end of the arc, we might learn something about friendship, but the status quo is returned to normal. Only in the season premieres and finales of the TV series does the status quo ever get shaken up. But the other issue with the comic is that the comics don't reference or cite older comics, and this one is no exception. And I've seen this in main series number 21 on the very first page. Trixie was introduced as the former queen of Diamondia. This was actually part of the event in Friends Forever number 6. This lack of citation is hurtful to the long-term existence of the My Little Pony comic series. Both of them for one major reason. Every comic is some ponies first. No matter what the comic, no matter where it places in the grand scheme of an entire universe, every comic is some ponies first. Eventually, citation will be necessary to at least let the reader know that this something mentioned happened in some other comic. In fact, if issue number 43 was some ponies first, then that comment about the main six's adventures in Abyssinia might make a new reader think that the last issue was about those adventures, and not about Pinkie Pie and Rarity remaking a book like it actually was about. But with all of that said, it's time to digress and get back to reviewing the comics. We begin issue number 44 with Twilight getting frustrated that she's not learning fast enough to be the smartest pony ever. She then gets the brilliant, awful idea of stealing the knowledge of every pony else using the box that the Riddler used in Batman Forever. She then starts using it on every pony in town, taking their knowledge.
meanwhile, back at the plot,
The CMC are running away in the ever-free forest when Scootaloo steps on a bunny's tail. That's when Fluttershy appears to accost the CMC for their crimes. Arrogance, this is their home and you came crashing through it. Intruders, ruffians, interlopers. This coming from the pony that decided to wrap herself up in thorn vines. The CMC come up with a brilliant plan to... Wait, weren't they just doing that? Meanwhile, back in Ponyville, the citizens find gift boxes outside, only to have the presents blow up in their faces. And this is why you don't buy Chinese knockoffs. The citizens escape into a theater only to be locked in by Pinkie Pie, who attempts to do stand-up comedy. And I thought Vogue poetry was bad. Elsewhere in Ponyville, Rarity is attacking any form of fashion faux pas when Luna runs in to fight her. Meanwhile, back in the forest, the CMC are able to make it into Sakura's home. They explain to the zebra the situation about how their friends have turned evil and now they're being chased by Fluttershy's army of furry woodland creatures. Apple Bloom opens the door for Sakura only to throw a bag of blue juju in her face and of course,
Look how fast I can run away.
Meanwhile, back in town, the fight between Rarity and Luna spills into the theater where Pinkie Pie is performing. She then pulls out a real cannon and brings the house can with one blast, causing everyone to scatter. Spike runs into Luna, and Sakura and the CMC run into them. They then figure out that since Spike bathed in the evil hot spring and was not affected, perhaps the cure is in his scales. That's when Rarity reappears to fight Luna, but Twilight separates them to stop the fighting, and Rarity rushes off to fight Twilight. Meanwhile, Fluttershy prepares her army at the edge of Ponyville for war. And then Pinkie Pie shows back up and throws balloons filled with evil water at the citizens, thus turning them evil instantly. Hold on a second, the evil water didn't take effect until the next day. It didn't work instantly. Either Pinkie Pie did something to the water, which she is never stated to have done, or the writers can't keep track of their own continuity. Anyway, Scootaloo dodges one of the balloons, but sees that Luna got splashed. And so our comic ends with a full-page spread of a return of Nightmare Moon. And kind of poorly drawn at that. Most people think the comic was rushed, but even if it wasn't, the comic does feel like it's rushing things because its pacing has become so atrocious in this comic. The comic keeps jumping all over the place, characters popping in and out at random, constantly jumping from one scene to another. It focuses on a scene for one, maybe 2 pages, before it jumps off to go do something else. Slow the hell down, you're giving the kids whiplash! This is another issue that the comics have been having more often recently. When the comic first started, the stories were pretty good for the most part, but it just seems like since issue number 25, the quality of the stories have been going downhill since. True, there have been some good comics, but nothing as good as those first 2 years. Now, there could be quite a few reasons as to why this is. They're running out of ideas and are just making things hope in hopes that something sticks. Some form of editorial mandate is occurring since the stories do have to get approval from both IDW and Hasbro. The writers are taxed from having to make up a comic in the span of a month, even if it's submitted months ahead of time. The list goes on. And while I can empathize with a stressed out staff, it doesn't change the fact that someone else said that this was good enough to print and sell to the public for money. Here's hoping that this last issue does not follow the same trend. But my instincts tell me that by the end of it, I'll be drunk, I'll be angry, and I'll be hating a poorly written comic. Our issue opens with a full-page spread of where we left off. Free again! No longer am I trapped in that pathetic shell that is Luna! Hold your horses, what's this about a pathetic shell? Is it possible for Luna to turn evil and become Nightmare Moon again, even without the Nightmare entity? I would say that since she can do the transformation at will, as evidenced in Nightmare Night, and the fact that such darkness still lurks inside of Luna, it's possible. She was formed when the Nightmare entity whispered sweet nothings into her ears, drew out her darker nature, and transformed her into Nightmare Moon. The same thing that happened to Rarity in the comics, in which we learned all of this. Main series number 5 through 8. This isn't like when the show ignores the comics, this is a case of the comics ignoring the comics. And an even bigger case of a series ignoring its own rules. Just like it did in the last issue with the damn water balloons. Ugh, let's just get on with it. Nightmare Moon and Pinkie Pie begin to fight, while Sakura runs away with Spike to craft a cure from his scales in tiny panels in the middle of the fight. Pinkie Pie gets knocked out, and Sakura applies the antidote. Pinkie Pie returns to normal, admitting that she was doing every thought that crossed her mind, with no filter as to why. Meanwhile, Applejack is in the telegraph office attempting to take over Appaloosa over the phone. Doesn't any pony do things in person anymore? Why is it always over the phone? Anyway, she's caught off when she sees Apple Bloom bringing down the telephone line? Since when did Equestria have telephones? Twilight, did you bring anything back from the human world? I think you did. Anyway, Applejack chases after Apple Bloom until she gets pelted with a water balloon full of cure, turning her back to normal. That's when the drums of war begin to beat. The CMC discuss getting to Fluttershy past her army of woodland warriors, and Scootaloo has a plan to capture Rainbow Dash. They challenge her to hit a moving target, and she does, which triggers a bucket of cure water to fall on her. The Crusaders tell her that she needs to cure Fluttershy, and just as Fluttershy is about to give the order to destroy Ponyville and return it to the forest land, Rainbow Dash uses the cure water to make it rain.
Hey, this isn't acid. Nope, it's antidote, and I'm feeling like kicking some road butts.
Fluttershy apologizes to her woodland friends and they disband. So wait, you're telling me that none of Fluttershy's animal friends objected to what she was ordering them to do? And that none of her animal friends that supported what she was doing are going to try and finish what she started? Okay then. However, there is an explosion at the Castle of Friendship. Inside, Twilight and Rarity are having a magic duel where Nightmare Moon injects herself into the fight. She offers to end the fighting and save their energy by dividing Equestria into thirds. The other two agree and they toast to their newfound alliance. Rarity drinks the water and returns to normal, but Twilight does not, claiming that she's too smart.
You think that I didn't know that the rainwater storm cured you? That you spiked these drinks with a cure?
As a matter of fact, yes. The cure in the storm just happened while you were fighting with Rarity. When did you have a chance to look outside? Twilight reveals that Nightmare Moon was no longer under the control of the dark water and sheds Luna's facade. That she was smart enough to predict that all of this would happen, and that she was too smart for every pony. Until she walked through the door and gets a bucket of cure water dropped in her head. You didn't predict that, did you, Miss Smarty Pants? Twilight expresses her apologies and returns the intelligence of every pony in Ponyville. And after helping to rebuild Ponyville, they travel back to the Darkwater Springs to mix the cure with the water, nullifying its effects. Pinkie pushes Twilight in to make sure that the water is no longer evil, but Twilight uses her magic to pull Pinkie into the water because it was funny. And so our comic ends with Luna taking her leave, explaining how friendship will see them through, and it was fortunate that their friendship was disrupted while they were evil.
Fortunate? Why do you say that, Princess?
Because if the six of you had been evil and worked together, I have no doubt you'd have been unstoppable. It's a cute line to end on, but this comic sucks! Remember the pacing issue that people had with Magical Mystery Cure? Imagine that, but doubled. Everything was rushed even worse than the last issue, and we never found out anything about the magical water. Where it came from, why it was tainted in the first place.
It's magic. We don't have to explain it.
Yes you do! Even magic has rules. And this hot spring suddenly appearing out of nowhere just to screw with our heroes and give us a Heroes Gone Bad story is, well, a good premise actually. But the execution was terrible. The only thing that really saves these comics are the art, and that's been a trend for a while. The art has overall been good, while the stories lately have overall been bad. I would have thought that changing the staff would have brought about new and fresh ideas, but it appears that those new and fresh ideas are still buried underneath bad execution, terrible pacing, omissions of important plot information, or just bad ideas to begin with. This is the current fate of the My Little Pony comics. A continuous stream of comics that can be, at best, okay, and possibly only memorable in how disappointing they are. And that's a shame for a series like My Little Pony. I want to reiterate, Ponies of Dark Water represents everything right and wrong with their comics. Great art styles and stories that you would have never been able to see on the television show, hurt by lame covers, poor pacing, and a lack of consideration for new readers. But that's not what I want My Little Pony to be. I don't want it to spew references or parallels to real-world events. I don't want it to be nothing more than a means to sell merchandise. I don't want the stories to be bad. I want it to be its own thing. I want it to be better, especially better than what it currently is. Why? Because despite my disappointment in the comics, in several of the episodes of Season 6, and in Hasbro's actions towards me and my channel, I still love it. Is it flawed? Yes, but we all are. But like anything, we can rise above our own flaws, learn from them, and be better than them. And I think that's what My Little Pony, at least the comics, needs. The creators need to take some time off, learn from all of the criticism, and then come back even better. They should do it for themselves to prove that they have what it takes to do it. They should do it for those dedicated, hopeful fans who have been constantly disappointed. And they should do it to respect a franchise that has brought a lot of great people together. While I won't provide links directly to the comics this time, I'll at least provide links to the websites where you can get them. You can still find all of your favorite MLP comics, both physically and digitally, at several websites, including Comixology, iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, IDW Publishing, on the MLP Comic App, or at your local comic book retailer. By the time I got this video up, I had already read My Little Pony Friends Forever number 32, and with this comic, I can no longer justify dropping $3.99 twice a month on a series of comics that will continue to disappoint. It's almost as bad as Friends Forever number 28, but at least this comic doesn't contain senseless murder of a sentient being. But this is where I close my wallet and my Comixology subscriptions to My Little Pony. Between Fosgit's awful artwork of everything, including Huitzel, and this unoriginal story about what bravery really is, another piece of that die-hard My Little Pony fan in you will die. I still want My Little Pony to be better, but until I see that happen, it's just not worth the money anymore. Hey, thanks for watching! I do more than just comic reviews, so why not click that bottom video to go watch Cyber Angel Plays, where I play various video games. Or click on that top video to go watch my last review. And remember to click that like button and share on social medias if you enjoyed the episode, leave a comment below to help me improve the show in the future, and to subscribe to keep up to date on all of my latest videos. I'm Critical Analysis, signing out.